Well, hey, you guys, Flickers of Fear time once again. So, pretty much even a casual horror fan, I feel like. I mean, you guys are here, so obviously you know who David Cronenberg is. But I kind of feel like maybe you'd have to be like a little bit more of a serious horror fan to know that David Cronenberg's son, Brandon, is also quite a legit filmmaker in his own right. He's directed three excellent films so far, which were Antiviral, Possessor, and Infinity Pool. But I kind of feel like what might be even less well known than that is that David Cronenberg also has a daughter named Caitlin. And she is actually quite a renowned photographer. She did like a lot of really famous album covers and things like that. And she recently decided to get into filmmaking. And her first film is the 2024 movie Humane. And it has less of the kind of sterile body horror weirdness that David and Brandon Cronenberg are known for, but it definitely has its own kind of darkly comedic charm to it. You know what I'm saying? So Humane is kind of like, I would call it maybe like a satirical survival horror kind of. It sort of has like a socio-political science fiction kind of edge to it. I will say it does go slightly heavy-handed with the messaging. It didn't really bother me that much, but some people might bother them. But it does have this really good, very compelling tension throughout. We're mostly watching largely unlikable characters. Some of them are likable, but they're all interesting. But all of them are kind of engaged in a very pointed battle to the death, pretty much. So Humane is set sometime in the near future. And it posits that climate change and other various factors have caused just massive environmental disasters around the world. And it's gotten to the point where the planet can no longer sustain its population because crops are dying and things of that nature. So the world's governments, therefore, have instituted a program whereby people may enlist, which is what they call it, to be euthanized to kind of lessen the burden on everyone else. So what they have this program set up, like if somebody in your family enlists, because I think only one per family is allowed, then the family actually receives $250,000. So it's like quite a large incentive. Now, the world of Humane, it doesn't look super sci-fi or anything like that. It looks pretty much like our own modern day. Most of the kind of crises that they're talking about are mostly shown through like news footage. So at the beginning of the movie, we have a very respected and now retired journalist, newscaster type guy whose name is Charles York, and he's played by the great Peter Gallagher. Now, he has arranged for his 4 adult children to come to his mansion and have dinner with him and his wife, Dawn, who is kind of like a well-known like celebrity chef, right? Now, this couple is clearly very wealthy. They have this gorgeous Victorian mansion, as I mentioned, and it seems like it's kind of far away from the problems that are plaguing the rest of the world. I mean, at least so it seems. So the York offspring, the adult children, they're a pretty mixed bunch. But all of them, to a person, are confused as to why they've been summoned out here to the family estate, because this is implied to be kind of an unusual thing for him to be requesting. They obviously all have very contentious and or distant relationships with their father. It's kind of implied, actually I don't know if implied is the word, because they do kind of state it outright, that he was really never there for them when he was growing up, because, he was a newscaster, so he was always traveling and working, and they're kind of like resentful that he was never around for them when they were children. So the adult children consist of, one of them is named Jared, and he's this very assholey, snide, kind of condescending anthropologist. And he's kind of on TV a lot, but he's a lot of times in hot water because he has very controversial opinions about how maybe we should expand the candidate pool for the euthanasia and maybe we should start like drafting people into it, shit like that. He also abandoned his wife and his son Lucas to run off with another woman. So he's clearly not a great dude. And then there's Rachel, who is this just cold-blooded, self-centered bitch. I mean, she's really, really bitchy, who is pretty much universally despised by the public because she's the CEO of this pharmaceutical company that was recently responsible for several deaths. And it's implied that she kind of knew that the drug they were putting out was going to kill people, and she didn't really give a shit. She actually has a teenage daughter named Mia, who is actually delightful. She's like the most likable character in this. She's a little bit of a wise ass, but like in a wonderful way. And Mia was actually not invited to this dinner. Like the dad, Charles, only wanted adults for reasons that will become clear later on. But Rachel was kind of forced to bring her anyway because of various scheduling issues and whatnot. Now, the two more sympathetic adult children are Ashley, who's kind of a vaguely hippie-ish type young woman. She's kind of struggling to make it as an actress, and I guess it's not going all that great. And then there's Noah, who is adopted into the family. I don't think they imply, like, he's clearly not white, but I don't think they really, like, say what... The actor is, I think, half Colombian and half Ecuadorian, I think, maybe. So it's implied that he's, like, maybe, you know, Central American. But I don't think they say that in the movie. But he was adopted into this, you know, very white family. And he was a piano prodigy as a child, but as he got older, he kind of started spiraling into drug use and eventually ended up killing a woman in an accident. Now, since then, he's actually gotten clean and seems to have completely put his life back together. He's even, like, fallen in love and moved in with another woman who is a recovering addict whose name is Grace. So everybody gets to the mansion and sits down to Dawn's fabulous Japanese meal that she's made. It's immediately apparent that none of these people really like each other very much, except for Ashley and Noah, who seem to be quite close. Rachel, in particular, who, like I said, is like a super twant, she is like super annoyed at being asked out to this house for some mysterious purpose that he wouldn't tell her. And she kind of demands to know in a very sweary, rant what the actual fuck it is that they're all doing out here. So Charles finally admits that he and Dawn have volunteered to be euthanized because they feel like it's the right thing to do for the human race. And they also hope that because they're both public figures, they hope that their sacrifice will inspire other wealthy people to kind of follow their lead. Because obviously up to now, due to the large cash payout that you get if a family member gets to be euthanized, it's mostly been members of the very struggling working class enlisting, to no one's surprise. Obviously, rich people aren't going to be signing up for that. So when they hear this news, the adult children are all livid. Ashley actually accuses her father of only doing it for his reputation, or like the reputation of his family name. She says, oh, because all of us kids are such fuck-ups or disappointments, so you wanted to go out on a high note so everybody would remember Charles York was a good guy and everything like this. Rachel actually bluntly asked Dawn, his wife, if it was her idea or if Charles pressured her into it, which is obviously kind of a sensitive question. So the whole conversation gets very, very heated, with the implication from at least two of the adult children that enlisting is just for those people. They kind of like say it that way. Now, Charles tries to diffuse this whole situation by kind of telling everyone, hey, just everybody chill out, go into separate rooms, before we have dessert. And then once everybody calms down, we can discuss this like adults. Tensions are still clearly very high, though, and become even higher when it's discovered that, one, Dawn has changed her mind about being euthanized and has fled the house to parts unknown. And two, that Charles had actually scheduled the euthanasia for that very evening so that all his children would be there with him and would hopefully be able to reconcile with him before he died. And the horrified offspring find this out when agents of the privately contracted company DOCS, or the Department of Citizen Strategy, very Cronenbergian, when they show up at the door with all the paperwork and all the equipment and everything like that. So this crew is led by the bald and rather irrepressible Bob. So Charles tries to explain to Bob that Dawn has actually done a runner, and he's like, tell you what, I'd like to cancel the procedure, but I still want to do it. I just want to schedule it for a later time, like after I've found Dawn and talked some sense into her, because all she needs is a good talking to. Now, Bob actually doesn't seem too fazed by this. He's like, yeah, this happens sometimes. And he takes Charles into another room to ostensibly fill out the cancellation forms. However, something seems to go amiss with the paperwork, the exact details of which we don't actually find out until later, like what it was they were actually wanting him to sign. But because of it, Charles decides to go ahead with the euthanasia anyway, even though Dawn is not there. So they do it. And then after it's done, the adult children are all kind of sad, but they're mostly just relieved. Like I said, none of them were all that close to their dad, so it's not really that big of a deal to them. So they're like, okay, well, it's over. And they think now they can send Bob and the crew on their way and just get on with their lives. Only now they're going to have their dad's big inheritance. But not so fast, says Bob. His contract is for 2 bodies, not 1. And he doesn't really particularly care who the second body belongs to. He's like, look, my next appointment is in 2 hours. So you guys have 2 hours to figure out which one of you is going to volunteer to be euthanized. So obviously the Yorks protest this vociferously, telling the crew, it's like, hey, why don't you guys go just get Dawn? She's the one that signed up for this shit, right? Now Bob says, well, no, we do actually have people out looking for her at this moment, but if we don't find her in time, I still need a stiff. So now Mia, Rachel's daughter, is out of contention because she's a minor and that's not allowed, but the 4 adult York progeny have to make a decision or one will be made for them. So the rest of the movie then is essentially like a fight for supremacy. So the Yorks try to determine like which of them sucks the most and should therefore be the one to put their head on the chopping block for the good of everyone else. And it eventually descends into them like straight up trying to murder each other. So I felt like, I mean, Humane was an extremely entertaining film, much funnier than I was expecting. The humor is quite dark, but I like that. And it's just totally on point. Some of the dialogue actually made me laugh out loud. Like, I really did like the script of this. As I mentioned, the characters are mostly hateable assholes, but are still really interesting to watch, especially when the shit really starts to hit the fan and like everyone's worst selves start coming out. I feel like the interactions between Bob and Mia, because they go out to wait in like the mobile morgue outside, like for the Yorks to make a decision. And when those two are interacting, like that was a highlight of the movie for me. I think that was like some of the most hilarious lines like in the whole film, like the two of them. So I don't know if I'd go so far as to call this a horror comedy, but it definitely has elements of satire to it. And although, as I mentioned, it is a little bit on the nose in parts, I was actually so invested in the situation that I wasn't really bothered by that. The tone of it sort of reminded me a little bit of kind of your similar dinner party battle royale type of movies, like, you know, Would You Rather or You're Next or something like that. But it had like a slightly dystopian veneer to it. Like I said, it's sci-fi because it's set in the future, but it's not overtly sci-fi, you know? And it's not Cronenbergian in the way that David's and Brandon's work is. But honestly, I think it's pretty great that Caitlin Cronenberg is actually kind of developing her own individual style apart from her very famous family. So I would definitely recommend this movie for those who like kind of violent survival sci-fi films that are sort of laced with black humor. And if you don't mind like a little bit of political commentary sprinkled in there too. So that will do it for this review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember, like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.